Greetings everyone, welcome to Top Tier Tips. Alright, last week we talked about movement. We talked about movement. This week we're going to be talking about the neutral game. So basically after you've just gotten comfortable with moving around and being able to just navigate yourself throughout the stages, alright, the next step to do is to learn how to engage your opponent. Alright. First, I'll just say what neutral refers to is a kind of state where both characters have zero advantage over each other. What that means is that both characters are standing on equal ground with a zero advantage. Like for instance, if you are at neutral, like if you look off your move details on the top right, it should say advantage +0. What that means is that you're staying at neutral. Alright, so this is generally how matches or engagements start, is where both characters are at neutral and are looking for some way to gain an advantage over their opponent. Alright, how you usually accomplish this is by making use of your character's different pokes and knowing like the ranges of them in order to be able to try and get an offense started on your opponent. Alright, the important things to like pay attention to when you're evaluating your pokes, like when you're evaluating your pokes during the neutral game, is to pay attention to how much distance in space an attack covers. More specifically, how much space they like control in front of your character. Like just knowing how much, like an attack, how much distance it controls in front, how much it covers. I mean, this kind of like notion of just controlling space in front of your characters is generally referred to as footsies. But other things you'll also need to take into account is both the speed and recovery of your pokes on both block and whiff. So for instance, during neutral, you generally want to use pokes that are safe on safe on block, and if possible, like safe on whiff. Because if you end up using moves that are like really unsafe on block or unsafe on whiff, then you're basically handing the ball over to your opponent and telling them to just roll with it and just punish you. Because basically, obviously a big aspect of neutral is trying to keep your opponent from gaining the advantage over you. Because if the opponent does end up gaining the advantage over you, then you're just basically handing the match over to them. So being able to have control over the neutral game is very important. Alright, for a neutral game, in general, it can pertain to basically like any distances you are on the field. Like generally with both characters like at the end of a screen, under most circumstances you're probably not going to be that much of like a threat to each other. But if you're like in much closer, then all of a sudden a much larger range of attacks come into play. But neutral can pertain to all ranges. In like a 2D fighter, for instance, technically you can have neutral even across the screen, because in 2D fighters they have much larger range or much larger usage of long range attacks or projectiles or different things like that. I mean, like attacks that like cover like a long reach, a long distance. But in general, for 3D fighters, neutral generally is going to be taking place most commonly around like mid-range or like close range. Alright, just on a bit of the neutral game with reference to poking. I'll use one of my favorite attacks with Ayane as an example. Alright, an attack I tend to use commonly around like mid-range during the neutral game is Ayane's for 3 H+K. Alright, a main reason why I use this attack is because it's a perfect example of an attack that is both safe on block and safe on whiff. Alright, with this attack here, as you can see by looking at the move details, when I throw it out, it's only -3 on block, and it also leaves Ione back turned, which is also an interesting attribute of it, because what it does is that if you were to whiff the move, you could press either back like 4-4 or 8P, and you'll end up actually being able to retreat a bit. So if the opponent isn't completely on point with whiff punishing the move, which is actually pretty hard to do in itself, then under most circumstances they won't even be able to reach you, and they may even actually leave themselves exposed. Then you can end up hitting them with let's say one of your whiff punishers, or you can hit them with something to get your offense started if they were to run at you. This move is generally just a really good example of a great kind of a ranged poke to use during neutral. I mean, as opposed to a move, say, I mean, here's some other range moves I would show that generally aren't good from just neutral. I'll just stick with Ione here. Other examples would be like her 236K, also known as her cannon drill or her drill kick. This attack is it's -12 on block, meaning that you're open to throw punishment up to a 10-frame throw, and the move has decent speed, but also if you're to whiff it, it leaves you at 39 frames of recovery. So the move actually could work because of its speed and the distance that it covers. It actually could serve as a good whiff punisher, but if you actually use it during the neutral game, then you can, if you use it, I mean, the opponent can punish you pretty easily for it. Because when you're fighting at range, when you're fighting Ione, that's a move that you're looking out for. People who misuse moves that are intended to be like a whiff punisher as a neutral poke. Another example, I'll just use Ione again here, is her 4 H+K, or her back H+K. This move here is another attack that has a pretty long reach at about 2.59 meters. But to show its attributes again, I mean, it's 23 frames, which is, it's, for a range move that's actually okay, but as a poke, that is a little on the slow side, and that the worst aspect about it is that it's -17 on block, meaning that you can be fairly open to 12-frame throws, for instance. Because with a -17, it gives the opponent quite a fairly noticeable window to be able to get even a slower 10 or 12-frame throw on you. I mean, hell, you can even strike punish it if you have like a, if you like, for instance, have an attack that is well, obviously 15 frames, or is 15 frames and faster to be able to strike punish it. But usually a 12-frame throw is usually good enough. But yeah, you kind of get the idea though that if an Ione player, for instance, uses 4 H+K against you, then you can throw punish it at any range, even if it gets it. Even if it's like around more like tip range or further out, it's still quite negative. It's either gonna be -17 or -60. So I mean, so you can end up seeing like the difference between like an example of like a good poke or like a bad poke. Like 3 H+K good, 4 H+K bad. But for like just for an example with Ione, it's not like the only one to have to use, but it is a good starting point. All right. Generally when I'm looking at neutral pokes, what I tend to do is that when you're looking at neutral ranged pokes, what you want is something that has relatively little risk, while giving you the opportunity to get your offense started on your opponent, or another strategy, which is to keep them out, which is just simply like knocking them away. like both like Ione's 3H+K, because of its safety, it can be both a get in move, but it also can be a keep out move because it knocks the opponent away when it hits, for instance. But just to continue on here with a kind of neutral poking. I mean, as you could probably guess, two characters that have strong neutral games overall in Dead or Alive 5 last round is Ayane and Momiji. I find that both of them have really strong neutrals. I mean, Momoji's another character I find that has a really strong neutral game. What that generally means, having a strong neutral game, it means that you can more commonly put more buttons or place more moves on the screen more comfortably than your opponent. That means that that Momoji has a lot of attacks that she can kind of get in with or poke to start her offense or to play keep out, which have relatively little risk. That means that you don't necessarily have to commit to anything really big or really huge in order to get an offense started with her, or to get your game plan working. Alright, I mean, a large aspect of Momoji's neutral is that she's really good at both getting in on an opponent and keeping them out. Like here, I'll show an example. Like a really good get-in move for Momoji, for instance, is her forward punch, or 6-6P. Like I'll just put on some stats now. Alright, this move is normally about -5 on block for forward punch, and on just normal hits here, it leaves her at +7, which is allows you to be able to get off any sort of follow-ups. Other strength about this move, I mean, besides, of course, it covers really good distance. Like 2.3 meters for a 15-frame move is outstanding. I mean, this is like one of the best like whip punishers in the game. But of course, as you could see, I mean, another strength of this attack is it also has a very dangerous follow-up. Her 6-6 PP allows you to be able to get off a launch juggle even on normal hit. So when an opponent blocks this move, they also have to respect the fact that you can do a follow-up. I mean, even though delays is not necessarily Momoji's strength, combined with the safety of her pokes, any delay can be useful. I mean, especially if that delay ends up leading to like a big launch combo. So this is a move that you're probably not going to get much retaliation just for throwing out. This is just for like get in. Not to mention that you can use. She has other pokes that she can use to try and get in on her opponent. I mean, as to show an example of keep out, I mean, it's a little different to, let's say, like Ayane or other characters like Hitomi or Ain, where Momoji's keep out is generally just based around making it difficult for the opponent to get in on you. So difficult to get an offense started. So with Momoji, some stuff you can use for keep out is stuff like her H+K. This right here is a 12-frame high kick that reaches about 1.67 meters, which is completely respectable for a 12-frame move that also happens to recover quite quickly. I mean, it only has 25 frames of recovery, so you're pretty much not going to get punished for this move. I mean, it's approximately, I think, if you do it in close range on a block an opponent, it's like -7 on block. But if you can manage to get it around like the tip range, then it would end up being, well, like, let's see, if I hit the opponent, it's +9. So if their opponent was blocking, it would end up being about -6. Because tip range moves tend to have less recovery than hitting a move within close, because it's only the latter part of the active frames will end up being hidden, so that ends up reducing recovery. So I mean, a character like Momoji, for instance, has a lot of moves that have like light recovery or are either light disadvantage on block or fairly like basically just moves that have like very little risk on block, for instance. So just like a recap, it's an thing that makes like for example Momoji's neutral so good is that she can put quite a bit of buttons on screen, comfortably controlling the space around her. I mean also, which means she has pretty strong footsies with very little risk, and also because of the ability to kind of just throw stuff out a bit more comfortably. I mean, it's both hard for an opponent to get in on her, but it's also tough to punish her because, like I said, she's also like a very safe character. So, but I'll just continue on a bit with the neutral game here. All right. If when you're thinking about playing, when you're thinking about going about your neutral game, what you want to decide is if you want to play either a keep out style or a rush down style. Like, those are the two contrasting styles. As you could probably guess, keep out means keeping the opponent away. Rush down means trying to find a way to get your offense started by being able to get in your opponent's grill and to try and stay in there. So what rush down generally means is trying to find ways to keep the opponent on the defensive, which is usually achieved by poking safely and making it tough for an opponent to easily retaliate against you. Alright, so the main kind of attribute of keep out style is that it's generally based around not letting your opponent get in on you. This could be this is generally based around a focus around resetting them a lot by knocking them out of their optimal attack ranges, or just simply blasting them throughout the stages. Characters like Hitomi and Ain can play an effective, simple keep-out game highlighted by solid use of their 236p or 46p Death Fist moves. Like I'll just show you one of them for an example quickly. Alright, I mean, if you want to end up practicing kind of a relatively straightforward, you just want to practice keep out, or it's a form of zoning, but just like keep out is that with like Hitomi or Ain, make use of their quarter 6 forward P or their 4-6 P. Like, these moves are both really fast. Like her 236p is a 15 frame mid punch that, well, it's only like -9 on blocks, so if the opponent is on point they can throw punish you for it, but since it's mostly designed to be a bit of a whiff punisher, it shouldn't be getting blocked that often. But what it is though, combine that with like your movement that you practiced in the last session. It can be a bit tough. It can be quite tough for an opponent to get on you if you make good use of her Death Fists. But to try and keep from getting too predictable, she also has a high version, which is her 4-6P. This move is a 12 frame. It's her 12 frame Death Fist that also has like really good range. Like her 236P reaches like 2.35, but her 4-6P reaches almost as much distance at 2.19. So right here, 12 frame mid punch for keep out and 12 frame high punch for keep out. So if you can just get used to using these two moves, then you can make it really hard to get in an opponent. So I mean, so if you want to play like a straightforward keep out style, Hitomi or Ain might be for you. Alright, Alright. I mean, right now I've been actually focusing mostly around the neutral game when you're at mid-range. So basically neutral game when you haven't actually engaged your opponent yet. But now, just as important as range neutral or neutral when you're at range is now neutral game when you're in close. Like now you're up in each other's grills. I mean, can be commonly considered a round 1 fight or R1F. Like this is just called a CQC or close quarters combat neutral. See, this is just when both characters are just right up in each other's faces. I don't know if they're hugging or whatever they're doing to each other, but what this is that this is generally when you're both butting each other's in close proximity. A major difference between close range, so CQC neutral and range neutral, is that a lot more attacks can come into play now. Because technically, you could pretty much throw out anything, and it'll just reach the opponent. But now there's a bit of a different focus here compared to mid-range. See, now in close range, you don't need to worry about footsies. Right now, you need to focus almost entirely on the speed and hit priority of your attacks, including evasive and crush properties. Alright, so when you're in close range neutral, like don't worry about distance that much or poking or anything. Worry about the speed of usually these three kind of hit levels. Your HML or your high, mid, low speeds. I mean, if I were to use I'll use my girl again, Ayane, as an example. If I was to show an example with Ayane, her high is a 10 frame jab. Her mid is a 13 frame 6P, although she also has a 13 frame 6K, and her low would be just a 12 frame low jab. So if you were to actually fill out the HML for her, it would end up being it would be called 10, 13, 12, or I10, I13, I12. Like what that means is your high jab, your 6P, and your 2P. So that means you can just call her a 10, 13, 12. Alright, these are the general speeds that you tend to focus around the most in close range. I mean, this is just in a more straightforward fashion, but I mean, if for instance, if you're just using a random character, those are the kind of things you look at. The high, mid, and low speeds. But of course, there are other factors that come into play. Alright, if I were just to continue just with Ayane as an example, if you're using Ayane against, say, let me just change character. I mean, Ayane's speed, her overall poking speed is considered like above average, but it's technically still not the fastest, so that doesn't mean she can just push buttons whenever in a close range, but with the way how her kind of tools work, she can actually fight both slower and faster characters just fine in close range. Alright, I'll just use my other girl here, Christy, as an example. Alright, to show a little comparison here, I'll just show Christy does have a bit of a contrast in speeds. Alright, Christy possesses a 9 frame jab, 11 frame 6P. She technically has a 12 frame mid kick and a 13 frame mid kick, and 12 frame 2P. So in this situation, Ayane can only beat out Christy on basically just on her low, for instance. So what that means is that if you suspect that Christy will try to either use a high jab or try and 2P you, then you can use your 2P to beat out her 2P, and you can use your high jab to beat out basically to beat out anything but her like her lows or her own 9 frame jab. So if you suspect that she's gonna try and use a mid against you that doesn't high crush, then you'll be punching her, for instance. So I mean, it's because if Christy was to use her 11 frame 6P, the most commonly you would have to use high. So like for instance, if you're fighting Christy in close, you're mostly gonna be focusing around like a 2P or like a P or 2P, because trying to use like one of your 13 frame mids against someone who has an 11 frame mid can actually be quite risky. And also, both characters actually both have really good tracking, so sidestepping them at round 1 fight can be a bit risky since neither character are overly linear. So if you are fighting Christy in close with Ayane, you will have to be a little patient and wait till you can get a bit of a read. But under most circumstances, you are going to be focusing around your P or 2P. Another thing you can do when fighting Christy is just simply don't engage her in close range too much. Because what you can do is fight her around mid-range and make her try and come at you. Because Ayane's mid-range to long-range neutral is superior to Christy's. For Christy's close-range pressure is stronger than Ayane, so that's why if you're fighting someone that's faster like Christy or Kasumi, you have to be a bit close. You have to be a bit careful in close. I mean, Ayane does have the benefit of having she does actually have expert holds that can try and deter people from using mids, and that is something that the opponent would have to worry about. But I mean, that's just you just kind of like get the idea of how like neutral works a bit there. I mean, if you're fighting someone with a 12 frame mid, for instance, then you could use a 12 frame. You can use a 12 frame high like your K, but these are just like different things to kind of to like take into account. I'll show you like other things like to try and like also pay attention like at like round 1 fight or like a neutral or anything like that is that it's not, you don't necessarily just, I mean, at a basic level you're just paying attention to your HML, like your high, mid, low, but like Helena's a character that has things a bit more unique in the sense that, I mean, yeah, I mean, on paper she'd end up being an 11, 12, or an 11, 12, 14, which would be her high, mid, low, but she does have a little her own kind of X factor, which other opponents have to pay attention to, is her Bokuho, particularly her Bokuho duck. Like a common things that Helena players would end up doing close is just go into this stance, and what it ends up doing is that it ends up limiting the opponent's options, because you basically won't be able to use a high. You won't be able to use a high against her when she's in that stance. So I mean, so this basically changes Helena around. I mean, she still has access to a 12 frame mid, although she ends up losing her 14 frame low. But by doing this, she ends up heavily limiting what an opponent can do to try and like hit her out of round 1 fight. So generally in this case, like if you were to fight Helena, well, a good idea first is that generally when fighting Helena, I mean, I usually find it's better to fight her at fight Helena at a bit of a range, because again, I mean, her evasiveness coupled with her strong stun game can be very dangerous for most characters. But she does, for instance, have a weakness of fighting at range, for instance. What I mean by that though is that if you can play good keep out against Helena, then she's gonna have to probably get a bit like creative with like how she gets in on you. Because like her ranged options can be a little limited, and she does rely quite a bit on her crushes. But yeah, but if you are like Helena, or another example is Brad Wong with his laydown stance. What that means is that if you're fighting someone that has a really evasive stance that you can go into in close range or at round 1 fight, then you'll have to watch out for the kind of options they like have out of it. Like if I were to show or I'll see if I can show a little bit of Brad to show like another character that has like a unique kind of close range we'll comment. I mean, for Brad, on paper, just the things he has a 10 frame jab, 15 frame 6P, and 14 frame low. He also has a 14 frame mid kick to help out, but generally speaking, that's not really very close poking speed in close. That's really not very good at poking speed in close. So his X factors are his different stances. Like if he was to enter his handstand, he gains access to an 11 frame mid kick. I mean, an opponent can beat it by just simply jabbing it out with like a 9 or 10 frame jab, or even I think an 11 frame jab. But by doing that, unless you have an 11 frame mid, you pretty much can't really use like a mid against that. But the main thing that Brad's like to do in close range, like especially like round 1 fight, is to go into just to go down into their laydown. And what this does is it ends up basically heavily reducing your options, because all highs will miss, and a lot of mids, like basically mids that generally aren't really true mids, will generally tend to miss. I mean, there are some like exceptions to the rule, like Christie's own 4K can be good at stuffing it, but the thing is that, but the general idea is that I mean, the kind of options you can use against it tend to become quite reduced. Although Brad is actually another character kind of similar to Helena in the sense that he does kind of suffer a little bit at range, because really a common range move for Brad would be like he has a running headbutt and his 236P headbutts. I mean, if you were to block the 236P, I mean, you can technically low throw it, but the variation, the running one, is it's only at -5 on block, so yeah. If you were to block it, then the window to low throw it would end up being much smaller, because at -5 you would be better off using a fast, like true mid, like something like with Christie. I tend to use her H+K to try and stuff it, or her full crouch 3P, for instance, to stuff it. So I mean, so these are just like different things to just kind of pay attention to if you're fighting a character like Brad, who has a bit of a unique CQC. Another thing also to be a bit careful of when you're fighting someone in CQC, which I did kind of allude to a little early on, was that you have to be careful if you're fighting a character that has good tracking, because of course, if a common retaliation to want to try and deal with the character in close is to want to try and like sidestep them. Like I find that if you end up misusing sidestep, then you can get counter hit easily. Like Christie and Ione are two characters that can be hard to sidestep. That can be because like for Christie, for instance, a lot of her strings can end up retracking. Like if you do know what attack she's going to end on, then you can technically sidestep the last hit. But if you don't know, then you can very easily get counter hit. Even if they delay it a bit, then that can throw you off too. So when you're fighting a character in close, especially if you're fighting someone that's faster than you, the notion will be to want to try and sidestep them. But of course, that if they don't end up using a move that can be easily sidestepped, then you'll end up be on counter hit. So with sidesteps, you'll have to use a bit of a read on those kind of things. But if you do get a successful sidestep, then you'll usually get a nice counter hit stun on your opponent. Alright, but I would say just now, you probably just didn't kind of get the general idea of how complex the neutral game can be in DOA5. Alright, Alright, what we recommend is evaluating the properties of your chosen character's moves to determine which are best to use at various ranges and during various situations. The goal of winning the neutral game is to gain an advantage over your opponent to get your offense started, or to keep the opponent from getting their offense started, which is also considered keep out. Generally, the one who maintains the momentum the most also happens to be the person setting the pace of the match. So if you can make the opponent fight on your terms, it's going to make it very hard for them to defeat you. Alright, so thanks for checking this out today, and I think that this will be it for this week. So thank you just for tuning in today, and I'll keep you and stay tuned for when the next session will be. Thank you and have a great day.